The second video talking about the memory stack of an application, specifically a Java application. And make sure to watch the first video before you watch this one, because I'm probably going to refer back to the first one quite a bit in this video here. This is just a reminder of what we talked about in the first video. We have the stack, the memory stack model here with the instructions of the application, the constants and global variables of the application, and then here the stack and heap. Mostly this is where the interesting things happen, is the stack and heap and kind of thing, how data is allocated to the stack and the heap. Today I'm going to go over the actual code of the application in the IDE and actually run it and show how you, now with your knowledge of the stack and heap, what that looks like in the IDE and how to make sense of it. And it'll help you debug and understand how the IDE actually shows you the stack of while you're debugging. It'll actually go through the steps of what we just went through in the last one, and I'll also make some fixes to our code that we should probably make. So here again is our application. I'll be putting this into our IDE and then our object, and just a reminder of what the last video looked like when it came to allocating or placing variables in the stack and then allocating objects onto the heap, and kind of what that looked like. And maybe I'll compare again what this looks like compared to what the Eclipse IDE shows. So here we're in the Eclipse IDE, and let's create a new Java project. I'm just going to call this Java Basics. I'm using Java 11, as you can see, and I'm using Amazon Corretto JRE or JDK. You can use Oracle, you can use, I know there's the Adopt Open JDK. This video doesn't really cover those things, but just a heads up of what I'm doing. Creating this Java project in Eclipse, and you can download Eclipse for free off of the internet. It is managed by IBM. It's a very full suite IDE that's free to use, so it's really nice. I am not going to create a module.info.java. I am used to Java 8 and prior. This is something that's newer to Java, a newer construct in more recent versions, and I'm not super familiar with it, so I'm going to hit Don't Create that. I'm going to create a new package and call it stack, and I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to select this box here for creating the main method for me, and I'm going to call this stack demo main, and it will add .java at the end. It's public. I'm not gonna, this isn't an object in and of itself, and so the superclass is fine, and not inheriting any other interfaces or things like that, so just press finish. So here we have that code. Let me just take the code we had before and just copy and paste it here. So there's a couple things. First of all, it's just annoyed because it doesn't have any view to a point object. So let's get that going. So I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call it point. And I'm not going to create any main, because main is the entry point of our application. And then I'm just going to copy and paste the point info from my slides. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So right off the bat, we have these warnings that I was telling about in the first video. It says right here, the static method increment point int from type point should be accessed in a static way. And so you can change access to static using point, and so that's actually probably the best fix to do. So we'll just do that, and again, it just changed it from this P to this point right there. I'm going to save that. So you can see that the IDE will show you why it's what's going on and why you should change it. But now you have a little more understanding with the stack frame and the stack pointer and objects why when it's static you do it this way. You're not actually referring to the object P when you're doing this. It's just when you're using a static method. So in Eclipse, we're going to debug this application. You can double click on this column over here. I'm just going to double click there. I want to put a space right there. And this is called a breakpoint. I'm putting a breakpoint there, and so when I debug it, it's actually going to stop the application right here, and this is right at the entry point of the application. I'm going to click on this bug here and just hit the debug. Allow it. This you do want to switch to the debug perspective. So when I hit switch, here it shows I have my debug and my Java perspective. I'm going to go back to debug. But when you hit switch, that's what it does. It takes you from the Java perspective, it's called, to the debug perspective. In the debug perspective, you can see on the left, it's not showing me my files anymore. I can go to the Project Explorer, but it's more showing the stack. This is the call stack. This is not the stack in memory like like we were talking about with the variables and data. But the call stack is technically is a memory, but it's a stack of where the method was called from, and we can see that we're just in main right now. We're stopped here at this line. Here, this is where I can see the breakpoints and expressions, but here this is variables. We're not going to go over it, but it does show on this stack. Something that I didn't show is the args. It's technically on the stack frame right here. Right here, when I do step over, we can see that the value x, it's an integer, and the value 0 is given. That's what this looked like right here. Let me go back right there. And then when I step over right here, same thing happens. The y is added to the stack frame. So the variables here is a view of the stack frame and what you have access to, and also possibly some global variables if you wish. But you can see how understanding the memory stack and that model helps you understand how to debug better and what is happening with the stack and the heap. Here I am going to not do step over, I'm going to step into. When I do step into, because this is a new point, oh, I did step over. I meant to do step into. Let's actually restart that, that'll be really fast. So I just pressed the stop button, and I'm just going to hit the debug button again, and it's going to take me here. So I want to do step into here. This will take me here, but then I just did a step over because that took me to some Java file class loader class. We don't need to worry about that right now. But then I'm going to step into again, and you can see how this actually took me into the constructor of the object. And so on the stack we have x and y, and then also on the stack we have this, just like how I mentioned here. See, on the stack we don't have any view of the previous stack frame. It's just this current stack frame has x and y that was passed, which is 0, 0, and then it has this keyword. And the this keyword, if I were to press this right here, this is then pointing to the x and y of that point. So it's actually pointing to the x and y of this point here. And then it shows that I actually gave it those values, even though the values were the exact same. And now I came out. So I come here, and then I see, okay, increment point x. So now I'm thinking, okay, is this going to increment this x here, because I'm passing it through? Oh, and by the way, when you're in debug mode, you can hover over, and it'll actually show the value of the variables. If I hover over P, it shows the values of the variables. So let's step into. So I actually go into that method, increment x. New stack frame. This x is totally new. So it is nothing to do with the x in the previous frame. Well, it has something to do with it because it was a value that was passed, but it's a copy. It's not the exact one that we're looking at. So I step over and I incremented it 1, and it prints out 1 and return x. And then here we have increment y, which does the same thing because increment y returned 1, and it incremented the 1 within the stack frame, but not that same y. So increment point 6 and 7. So if I go in, it's actually not incrementing a point. It's just returning a brand new point with the values 6 and 7. So let's actually step into it. We go into the constructor. We assign this point x6 and y7, and then we get out of it. And it returned point, so we can actually see the point here. Oh, actually, did I have that wrong? I think I have my code wrong. Let's see. Let's step into this. X and Y. Step into it. Ah, I do have it wrong. See what I did wrong there? I accidentally don't have this as Y. I need to change that. You could see that while I was debugging, I saw a point that said 0.66, and I was like, that's not right because I passed it as 6.7. So you can see how debugging can help you catch errors like that. Just real fast, I want to see if I have that on my slide. Yes, I do. That is an error. Going back to the application, just debugging again, stepping over, and now we're at increment this point. So now, again, it has P on the stack. P has 0, 0, and I'm incrementing this point by P, or by 3, and it's this point P. So when I go in, this was referring to this P right here. The P that is right there. So with this object, I am incrementing it by 3. So when I do that, it shows that the point x equals 3. And if I go here, if I hover over P, it'll show that the x is 3, and here the x is 3. Same thing here with the y. If I'm just stepping over instead of into, it shows that y now became 5 when I incremented 5. Now this one, again, this tricky one, I'm passing P and 2 and 4 into the static method. So let me go into it. So when I go into it, the stack frame has a reference to that point, and it also has 2 and 4 that was passed through. And with this reference, I am now able to increment the point P, so now it's 5, and now it's 9, right there. And when I get out of that method, again, that same point, it's referring to that same point 5 and 9, or that same point that now has 5 and 9. I'm going to go into this one because it's creating a new point, and it's just giving it values of 10 and 10. And then when I step over, now I have this 2 different points. Remember, there was that one point that was created by this increment point right there, which this should be poorly named. It should probably be named create point, which is kind of, again, contrived and unneeded. But we have now no access to it, but we do have this P and this PP, and these points we now are able to print out. And we printed them out, and we now finish the application. What else do I want to show? I do want to show one other thing. If I do a point P2 equals P, and then I do point dot or P2 dot increment this point, and let's increment it by 22 or 21. what do you think is going to happen with this P now? Is it referring to the same point? Let's see. Let's run it real fast. It is. So now you can see that when I'm referring it to the same point, when this is P2 is called, this P and P2 are now referring to the exact same thing. They have the same reference. So anything I do to P2 is going to do to the object P. So just make sure that when you're manipulating objects like this, that you understand that objects elsewhere or methods can refer to that same point, and even though it's called by a totally different variable name, and things might be manipulated elsewhere. But that is, again, just a good point of showing how this is passed by value. Let's actually debug that real fast. I'll switch it. I'm just going to step over until I get to that. So then I have PP, so I have point 2 and or P2 and P. And you can see they actually have the same ID here, referring to their just kind of the same object. And so it's the exact same one, even though they have that different thing. And so when I do P2 dot increment this point by 21, both changed. They're the same exact object. I hope, just to recap, I hope that you now kind of understand better the memory stack and how that works when you're looking at variables and versus objects and data within objects, and also static versus non-static. And this is just kind of a very brief intro into debugging. But debugging is really, when you understand the memory model or the memory stack model, you're now able to understand what debugging looks like and why it shows the framing in the variable window here in Eclipse. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and I hope it was informational for you and will help you become a better programmer.